Figure skating is a sport built on grace, on precision, on the quiet illusion that everything is under control. The skaters make it look effortless, gliding across the ice with a beauty that gives no hint of the physical cost underneath. But the ice is unforgiving, and sometimes the danger doesn't come from the sport at all. Sometimes it arrives without warning, in the middle of an ordinary morning, or on a quiet street, or at 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. The skating world has seen tragedy in forms nobody could have predicted. Careers cut short, lives taken in seconds, moments that left the entire sport standing still, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Here are 5 of the deadliest figure skating moments that nobody saw coming. It was February 15th, 1961. Cold and gray over Brussels, Belgium. At Idlewild Airport in New York City, the entire United States figure skating team gathered for photographs on the steps of Sabena Flight 548, a Boeing 707 operated by the Belgian national airline. They were headed to Prague, Czechoslovakia, for the World Championships. Coaches, family members, and officials traveled alongside them. 72 people boarded that plane. Not one of them came home. The 1961 U.S. Figure Skating Championships had just been televised nationwide for the first time, broadcast on CBS Sports Spectacular, and the team stepping onto that flight were, for many Americans, brand new household names. Among them was Lawrence Owen, 16 years old, the reigning U.S. ladies champion, who had just appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Bradley Lord was there too, the men's champion. So was 9-time U.S. ladies champion Maribel Vinson Owen, traveling alongside both of her daughters. Coaches who had spent decades building the sport. Parents who had spent years watching their children become something extraordinary. The transatlantic crossing went without incident. The trouble started during the final approach into Brussels. A smaller aircraft had just landed on the designated runway and hadn't cleared it yet, so the Sabena pilots initiated a go-around. During that maneuver, the plane's nose began pitching upward, and the crew couldn't correct it. They circled 3 times, trying to regain control. On the 3rd pass, they lost it completely. The Boeing 707 came down in a field outside the town of Berg-Kampenhout, just short of the airport, and burst into flames on impact. Everyone on board was killed. A farmer working in the fields below also lost his life. Investigators were never able to establish a definitive cause. The most widely accepted explanation pointed to a failure in the tail stabilizer mechanism, a finding that prompted Boeing to add stabilizer trim cutout switches to existing and future planes. But that mechanical finding did little to absorb the scale of what the skating world had just lost. 18 skaters gone at once. The entire coaching infrastructure of American figure skating wiped out in a single morning. The World Championships in Prague were canceled. The sport had to stop and reckon with a silence it had never experienced before. What made it so hard to process was the timing. This was the moment American figure skating had arrived on a national stage. The cameras had just found them. The country had just started paying attention. Lawrence Owen was 16 years old, with a Sports Illustrated cover and a world championship ahead of her. She never got off the ground in Brussels. In the aftermath, the United States Figure Skating Association rebuilt from almost nothing. A memorial fund was established to develop the next generation of skaters, and the sport did eventually recover. But those who were there in 1961, those who knew the names on that manifest, understood that something irreplaceable had been lost. Not just careers, not just medals that might have been won. An entire generation of people who loved the ice, gone before the world had a real chance to know them. The crash of Sabena Flight 548 remains the single most devastating tragedy in the history of figure skating. Not because of the number alone, though 72 lives is a number that resists comprehension, but because of what those lives represented. A sport at the exact moment it was stepping into the light. Its best young skaters standing on the steps of a plane, smiling for cameras, headed somewhere they never arrived. It was the morning of November 20th, 1995. The rink at the Lake Placid Olympic Training Center was quiet. Sergey Grinkov and his wife, Ekaterina Alexandrovskaya, were running through their new program, preparing for the upcoming Stars on Ice tour. It was a routine practice. Grinkov was 28 years old, in the kind of physical condition most people never reach. He had won Olympic gold twice. He had won 4 world championships. He had no known heart condition, and nobody watching him skate that morning would have seen anything to worry about. Then, partway through the run-through, he didn't put his arms around Gordieva for their lift. She assumed it was his back, which had been bothering him on and off. He shook his head. Then he bent his knees and lay down on the ice, carefully, as if he was choosing to rest. He never got up. Sergey Grinkov died of a massive heart attack at 28 years old. The autopsy revealed something that had been invisible to everyone around him, including the doctors who had examined him throughout his career. His coronary arteries were severely blocked, the arterial opening reportedly reduced to the size of a pinhole. Further testing uncovered a genetic risk factor linked to premature heart disease, a variant now sometimes called the Grinkov risk factor, in recognition of how his case brought it to wider medical attention. Gordieva was 24. Their daughter Daria was 3 years old. The two of them had been paired together since she was 10 and he was 14, brought together at the Central Red Army Club in Moscow by a coach who saw something in the combination. They grew up on the ice, won everything there was to win, fell in love somewhere along the way. At the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary, they took gold unanimously. They retired, married in April 1991, then came back for the 1994 Games in Lillehammer, and won gold again, becoming the only reinstated professionals to achieve that. Their last public performance together had been 8 days before Grinkov collapsed, on November 12, 1995, in Albany, New York, at an exhibition called Skates of Gold to 3. People who saw them skate in person described something that television didn't fully capture. They didn't make noise when they moved. Their blades whispered over the ice rather than cutting into it. There was a quality to how they moved together that didn't come from technique alone, something that had built over 13 years of shared ice time, shared pressure, shared everything. The skating world went quiet when the news reached them. Scott Hamilton, who was close to both Grinkov and Gordieva, was among the first to reach her after he was gone. A few days later, at Grinkov's wake, she told Hamilton that she thought their life together had been too perfect, that fairy tales don't get to end happily. Grinkov was buried at the Vagankovsky Cemetery in Moscow. In February 1996, Gordieva skated a solo tribute, a televised performance called A Celebration of a Life. Afterward, she spoke to the audience and said she hadn't skated alone that night. She said she had skated with him, and that was why it had gone the way it did. She went on to write a memoir about their life together and continued skating professionally for years. But the morning of November 20th, 1995, settled into the skating world in a way that didn't fade, because it had been so completely unremarkable right up until it wasn't. No warning, no visible sign. Just a man lying down gently on the ice in a quiet upstate New York rink, and then a silence that spread far beyond that building. He was 28 years old. He had already won everything the sport could offer, and still, the ice gave no warning at all. It was the afternoon of July 19, 2018. Denis Ten was on a street in Almaty, Kazakhstan, the city where he had been born 25 years earlier. He noticed two men near his car. They were stealing the mirrors off of it. He confronted them. What happened next took only seconds. One of the men stabbed him in the thigh. The blade severed his femoral artery. By the time Ten reached the hospital, he had lost too much blood. Surgeons operated but couldn't save him. Denis Ten, the 2014 Olympic bronze medalist and one of the most recognized figures in international skating, was gone before the day was over. The news reached the skating world through social media, in the way terrible things travel now, and the reaction was immediate and raw. Adam Rippon wrote that Ten had been a huge inspiration, that his time with them was way too short. Patrick Chan said he felt honored and grateful to have shared the ice with him, that Ten was one of the most beautiful skaters to have graced the sport. Johnny Weir, who had watched Ten deliver a brilliant performance at the 2013 World Championships and been stunned when the scoring didn't reflect it, said he was completely devastated. Ten had competed in 3 Olympic Games. He was only the second singles skater to ever represent Kazakhstan at the Olympics, and he carried that role with a kind of seriousness that went beyond personal achievement. He trained in Moscow and in California. He had built friendships across countries and disciplines, with people who had watched him develop from a young skater with obvious raw talent into someone who represented something much larger than his own results. He was also serving on the Athletes' Commission of the International Skating Union, working to shape the sport from the inside. There was something distinctive about the way he moved on the ice. Skaters and commentators who watched him regularly noticed it. He wasn't simply technically accomplished. He skated with an attention to the music and the moment that set him apart, the kind of quality that makes people remember a performance long after the scores are forgotten. The circumstances of his death made it particularly hard for the skating community to absorb. It wasn't a fall during competition. It wasn't something that happened in a training rink or on the road to a tournament. He was standing on a street in his own hometown, doing the kind of thing any person might do when they see something wrong. The violence was immediate, and it was final. 2 men were later arrested and charged in connection with his death. Kazakhstan's skating federation and the broader international community mourned someone whose absence left a genuine gap. He was 25 years old. There were competitions still ahead of him, seasons he hadn't skated, a career with years remaining in it. Alex Shibutani, the 2018 Olympic bronze medalist in ice dancing, had skated alongside Ten in shows and competitions over the years. After Ten was gone, Shibutani shared a video he had made of his friend's Olympic experience and recalled the summer he and his sister Maya had convinced Ten to join Twitter. Ten had declined the obvious handle, Shibutani explained, because Ten was always a little different. He flipped the first letters of his name instead, and that was how he became Denis Ten. It's a small detail, the kind that only surfaces when someone is gone, and the people who knew them are searching for ways to hold on to who they actually were. Denis Ten's death stood apart from every other tragedy in this video, because the skating world has some frame of reference for injury, for illness, for the physical toll of a sport built on risk. It has far less frame of reference for this. The danger didn't find him on the ice. It found him outside, on an ordinary street, on an unremarkable Thursday afternoon, in the city where his story had started. It was July 17, 2020. Moscow was deep in a summer that, for most of the world, felt like an extended pause on ordinary life. Ekaterina Alexandrovskaya was 20 years old. She had been a world junior champion. She had skated at the Olympics. She had represented a country that wasn't even the one she had been born in, and she had done it at 18, on the biggest stage the sport has. She fell from the window of her 6th-floor apartment in Moscow. Authorities ruled her death a suicide. Her coach, Andrei Kekalo, confirmed that she had recently been diagnosed with epilepsy and had been struggling with depression. Her skating partner, Harley Windsor, had announced their split in February 2020, citing her health concerns. She had retired from the sport. She was 20 years old, and her career was already behind her. The story of how she had reached the Olympics in the first place was the kind that people tell because it seems to prove something about what's possible. Windsor, a skater from Sydney, couldn't find a pairs partner anywhere in Australia. At the prompting of Nina Moser, who had guided Tatiana Volosojar and Maxim Trankov to gold at the 2014 Sochi Games, he traveled to Moscow in December 2015 for a tryout with Alexandrovskaya. They connected immediately. 10 months later, they had won Australia's first ISU Junior Grand Prix, beating partnerships from Russia and the United States. In March 2017, in Taipei City, they took the World Junior title, edging out a Russian pairing that would later win the Senior European Championship. Alexandrovskaya became an Australian citizen in 2016. When they skated at Pyeongchang in 2018, Windsor became the first Indigenous Australian to compete at a Winter Olympics. They finished 18th in the short program and didn't advance to the free skate. A disappointment, but they were young. There was more time. That was the assumption. The seasons after Pyeongchang wore them down in different ways. Both skaters dealt with injuries. They relocated to Montreal to train under new coaches, then back to Sydney. Windsor's recurring foot problems forced them to withdraw from major events. Alexandrovskaya's health kept slipping, and not just physically. The epilepsy diagnosis, Kekalo explained, came after multiple concussions she had sustained over the course of her skating career. Pairs skating is a discipline that asks the body for things it doesn't easily give back, and the years of falls, lifts, and impacts had accumulated in ways that didn't appear in any results table. Windsor's announcement in February 2020 was framed carefully, focused on health, wishing her well. There was no full picture offered to the public of what she was actually living with at that point. Ian Chesterman, who had been Australia's chef de mission at Pyeongchang, spoke after her death about the person he had known there. He called her vibrant, humble, and relentlessly determined. He said that life since the Games had not been easy for her, and that her death was a reminder of how fragile life is. The distance between the athlete Chesterman had watched compete in Korea and the 20-year-old in that Moscow apartment 2 years later was not something the public had been given any real view of. Jeff Lipshut, chief executive of the Olympic Winter Institute of Australia, noted that she and Windsor had been Australia's first figure skating world champions. She had come to the country to pursue something she believed in, and she had achieved it. By almost any external measure, her career was a success. But the cost had been running in the background the whole time, quiet and accumulating, invisible to almost everyone outside her immediate circle. By July 2020, the cameras had long since moved on. The medals had been won, the championships decided, the headlines written. What was left, nobody saw coming. It was the spring of 2003. Alexei Yagudin was training in Connecticut, pushing to hold the level he had built over the previous year, when he had won Olympic gold at the 2002 Salt Lake City Games. He was 23 years old, a 4-time world champion, and by any honest accounting, he was at the top of the sport. Then he fell. Not a catastrophic, headline-making collapse. An awkward fall in practice, the kind that happens dozens of times in any given training week. But the angle was wrong. His skate blade caught his hip and cut deep into the tissue, reaching the femoral artery. He began losing blood fast, with almost no margin between what was happening and what couldn't be undone. He was rushed into emergency surgery. The procedure ran for hours. Medical staff who treated him said afterward that he had come within minutes of bleeding to death. He survived, but the injury didn't heal the way a clean wound heals. The damage was too deep and too layered, and what it left behind was enough to end the competitive career of a man who had just stood at the peak of the sport. To understand what that meant, the timeline matters. Yagudin had first noticed discomfort in his right hip back in December 2001, months before the Salt Lake City Games. He didn't stop. He won the gold medal in February 2002, then continued. By August of that year, the pain had worsened seriously enough to become a real concern. Specialists diagnosed severe inflammation and fluid buildup in the joint. Surgery wasn't recommended at that point. He continued with medical treatment and physical therapy, withdrew from 2 events in late October when the pain made competing impossible, and kept working toward a return. Then came the fall in Connecticut, the hours on an operating table, and the slow recognition afterward that his body wouldn't allow him back to where he had been. In May 2003, he underwent arthroscopic surgery on the right hip. The procedure was reported publicly as a standard 2-hour intervention, performed by Dr. Jeffrey Westrich, who said it had gone well and that Yagudin should be able to skate again within 2 months. The public timeline looked manageable, but the accumulated damage, the inflammation that had been building since 2001, the original wear on the joint, and the trauma from the training fall was more than that recovery window could address. The competitive career that had produced 4 world championship titles and an Olympic gold medal was effectively finished before he turned 25. What stays with this story is how ordinary the moment was. No collision, no structural failure, no dramatic circumstance outside the ordinary rhythms of training. Just a fraction of a second in a quiet rink where the angle of a fall aligned with the one place on his body it shouldn't have. Yagudin had built his skating on control and physical power, had pushed through pain that would have ended most careers far earlier, and in the end, it was an unremarkable morning in Connecticut that closed the door. He continued skating professionally, appearing in shows and exhibitions for years. He never left the sport entirely. But the competitive chapter, the one that had defined him as one of the best male skaters of his generation, ended in that training room without ceremony. A few minutes from something the surgeons couldn't allow. The most disorienting thing about that chapter's end was how little it resembled the career it closed. Yagudin had faced opponents who were technically formidable, had competed at the Olympics under immense pressure, had pushed through months of hip pain that would have ended other careers, and had never seemed to be in any particular danger. The training fall that changed everything happened in one of the safest possible settings, in a practice session, at a facility designed exactly for this kind of work. The sport offered no warning and no narrative logic. A blade caught a hip at the wrong angle, and a few minutes later, the career was over. These 5 moments span 6 decades and 4 continents, a flight that didn't land, a heart that stopped without a single visible warning, a street confrontation that lasted seconds and cost everything, a young woman's quiet deterioration, invisible until it was too late, a training fall that found the one place it could do the most damage. Figure skating asks its athletes for total commitment, complete trust in their bodies, complete belief that control is possible. These 5 stories sit at the edge of that belief. The ice doesn't distinguish between the careful and the careless. It holds everyone equally until it doesn't.